When an American soldier questioned whether British Royal Guards were just for show, Corporal Adam Wade made a decision that would shock everyone. What happened next wasn't captured by tourist cameras or palace photographers. Instead, it took place in a brutal U.S. Army training facility where Wade would face the 6 events of the U.S. Army Combat Fitness Test. The ceremonial red uniform was gone, replaced by standard PT shirt and track pants. But as Wade stepped up to attempt the test, nobody knew about his 2 tours in Helmand Province or the IED scar across his back that marked the real soldier beneath the red tunic. It all started with a single careless comment that would set everything in motion. If that surprised you, just wait for what happens next. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more real stories behind the uniform. The words came during what should have been a routine day outside Buckingham Palace, where American and British forces had gathered for a formal ceremony. Staff Sergeant Garrett had traveled from his base to witness the pageantry, but his patience wore thin as tourists crowded behind the black and gold barriers with cameras clicking endlessly. His voice carried just far enough when he muttered to his colleague that these royal guards were nothing more than fancy statues paid to look pretty for pictures. Corporal Adam Wade heard every word while maintaining his rigid stance at the palace gates. 8 years of service had taught him to remain motionless regardless of external distractions, but inside his chest something burned with quiet intensity. The red tunic and bearskin hat that marked him as one of the Queen's Guard had become both his pride and his burden. Tourists saw the uniform and assumed he was merely ceremonial decoration, but they never saw the man beneath the wool and brass buttons. Wade's military record told a different story than his current posting suggested. 2 deployments to Afghanistan between 2019 and 2021 had tested him in ways that palace duty never could. He had earned his place in the Grenadier Guards through grueling selection processes that most soldiers never attempted. The mountains of Helmand Province had been his classroom, where he learned to survive firefights and navigate hostile terrain while carrying wounded comrades to safety. His commendations that now sat quietly in his modest London flat spoke of courage under fire and leadership in combat zones. The irony stung deeply as Wade processed the American's dismissive words. His current role required him to stand perfectly still for hours while maintaining absolute discipline and situational awareness. Every muscle in his body remained under conscious control as he monitored crowds for potential threats while projecting the dignity expected of his position. The physical demands alone would challenge most soldiers, but the mental fortitude required was something few understood. Yet to casual observers, he appeared to be nothing more than a tourist attraction. What made the comment particularly painful was Wade's respect for American military traditions and the soldiers he had served alongside in Afghanistan. He had witnessed their professionalism and courage firsthand during joint operations where British and American forces worked together against common enemies. The dismissal felt like a betrayal of that mutual respect and partnership forged in combat zones where uniforms mattered less than competence and character. The weight of representation pressed down on Wade's shoulders as he considered his response. He wasn't just defending himself, but the entire tradition of the Household Division and centuries of military heritage. The Queen's Guard maintained their operational capability that included counter-terrorism duties and emergency response throughout London. Every guardsman carried the legacy of those who came before while maintaining readiness for whatever challenges might arise. Wade's mind began calculating risks and possibilities as tourists continued snapping photographs around him. Proving himself meant venturing into unfamiliar territory where American fitness standards and training methods would test him differently than anything he had experienced. The U.S. Army Combat Fitness Test represented a completely different approach to measuring soldier capabilities with events designed specifically for American military doctrine and physical conditioning protocols. The decision crystallized slowly as Wade weighed personal pride against professional obligations. The American sergeant's comment had lit a fuse that would burn until Wade could demonstrate the capabilities hidden beneath his red tunic and polished boots. As his shift ended hours later, Wade made the choice that would define everything that followed. What happened next would require preparation that nobody could witness. Wade's preparation began before dawn in the Wellington Barracks basement gym when the corridors fell silent and the last duty shift ended. He slipped through the darkened hallways with his rugged kit bag carried between duties. The fluorescent lights hummed to life as he entered the empty facility where Olympic barbells and dumbbells waited in perfect rows like soldiers at attention. Wade approached his preparation with the same methodical precision that defined his ceremonial duties, but now every movement served a different purpose. He had studied the 6 events of the U.S. Army Combat Fitness Test until he could recite the requirements in his sleep. The 3-rep max deadlift demanded explosive lower body strength, while the standing power throw tested upper body coordination and power through a backward medicine ball throw. Hand-release push-ups required soldiers to lower completely to the ground before pushing back up while maintaining perfect form throughout multiple repetitions. The sprint drag carry event presented the greatest complexity with its 5 distinct 25-meter segments that combined speed with strength and agility. Wade practiced the lateral shuffles repeatedly, knowing that quick directional changes could make the difference between success and failure. The farmer's carry with 40-pound kettlebells built grip strength and core stability, while the sled drag backward tested his ability to generate power in reverse motion. Each component demanded different muscle groups and energy systems working in rapid succession. His training sessions stretched beyond 2 hours as Wade pushed through exercises that targeted every aspect of the American test. Deadlifts became his foundation, starting with 150 kilograms and gradually building to 160 kilos over multiple sessions until the hex bar groaned under the iron weight. The medicine ball throws required him to generate explosive power from his entire kinetic chain, launching the 10-pound sphere over his head and backward for maximum distance. Push-ups evolved from standard repetitions to the hand-release variation that eliminated any momentum or cheating through partial range of motion. The solitary nature of his preparation suited Wade perfectly, as he had never sought validation or recognition for his efforts. Afghanistan had taught him that preparation happened in silence, while results spoke loudly enough when the moment arrived. He refused to discuss his plans with fellow guardsmen or seek advice from fitness instructors who might question his motives. The training remained his private mission, conducted in the shadows between his official responsibilities and sleep. Core strength became his obsession, as Wade recognized that the plank hold could determine his overall success or failure. He practiced holding the position until his muscles screamed and sweat pooled beneath him on the rubber mats. 2 minutes represented the minimum passing requirement, but Wade pushed himself beyond 4 minutes, knowing that mental toughness mattered as much as physical capability. The sustained muscular effort required absolute concentration and the ability to push through discomfort that would make most soldiers quit. Cardiovascular conditioning rounded out his preparation as Wade logged countless miles on the barracks treadmill and outdoor track. The 2-mile run would test his overall endurance and ability to maintain pace under fatigue from the previous 5 events. He practiced running with elevated heart rate and depleted energy stores to simulate the actual test conditions where the final event could break even the strongest soldiers. In the 6 days before the test, Wade studied official ACFT standards and technique guides to refine every movement pattern and efficiency standard that could make marginal improvements in performance. His methodical approach revealed his character and dedication to proving himself worthy of respect regardless of his current uniform or assignment. The question remained whether his secret preparation would prove sufficient when facing the Americans who had designed their test to challenge soldiers within their own system. When Wade arrived at the British Army training facility near Surrey, the looks he received told him everything about their expectations. The morning mist hung low over the grounds, where American personnel had gathered to observe what they assumed would be an entertaining spectacle. Sergeant Garrett stood with his arms crossed, watching Wade emerge from the transport vehicle in standard PT gear consisting of navy shorts and a gray military shirt. The other American soldiers exchanged glances that spoke louder than words, as they sized up the guardsmen who had somehow convinced their leadership to allow this unusual demonstration. Garrett had flown in from Fort Campbell specifically to witness what he privately considered a publicity stunt designed to showcase British ceremonial traditions rather than genuine military capability. His 22 years of service had taught him to recognize real soldiers from those who simply wore uniforms, and in his estimation, Wade represented the latter category. The sergeant made no effort to hide his skepticism as he approached Wade with the casual swagger that marked American military confidence. His handshake was firm but brief, followed by a look that suggested he was already preparing to be disappointed by what he expected to see. The cultural divide became immediately apparent as Wade maintained the formal politeness ingrained through years of palace duty, while the American soldiers embraced their characteristic directness. Where Wade spoke in measured tones and complete sentences, the Americans interrupted each other with casual banter and observations about his chances of completing their fitness test. One soldier wearing dark Oakley sunglasses commented loudly enough for everyone to hear about whether Wade could handle their challenges while wearing his fancy red jackets, though the ceremonial uniform remained safely stored back at Wellington Barracks. His reservist companion nodded in agreement, drawing chuckles from the assembled group, who seemed to view the entire event as a publicity stunt rather than a serious military evaluation. Wade absorbed every slight and dismissive comment while maintaining the composed exterior that had served him well during countless hours of ceremonial duty. His face revealed nothing of the internal fire that burned as he listened to their assumptions about his capabilities and dedication. The 6 days of covert training had prepared him physically, but nothing could have readied him for the psychological pressure of representing not just himself, but the entire tradition of the Queen's Guard. Every American soldier present would judge his performance as a reflection of British military standards and ceremonial duties that stretched back centuries. The weight of representation pressed heavily on Wade's shoulders as he realized that failure would confirm every stereotype about guards being mere tourist attractions rather than operational soldiers. Success would require him to exceed expectations that had been set impossibly low by Americans who confused ceremonial precision with military weakness. The challenge had evolved beyond personal vindication to become a matter of national and regimental pride that demanded nothing less than complete commitment to proving his worth. Sergeant Garrett established himself as the primary skeptic by volunteering to oversee Wade's attempt at the U.S. Army Combat Fitness Test. His manner suggested someone who expected to be either impressed or entertained, but leaned heavily toward the latter possibility. The sergeant explained the 6 events with barely concealed condescension, as if Wade might not understand the basic requirements of military fitness testing. Each explanation carried the unspoken assumption that ceremonial soldiers lacked the practical knowledge that came from real military training and operational deployment. The other American personnel gathered in a loose semicircle around the testing area with the relaxed posture of spectators rather than fellow soldiers. Their conversations drifted toward predictions about which event would expose Wade's limitations first and whether he would complete the entire test without requesting modifications or assistance. The atmosphere carried the casual cruelty of soldiers who had decided that respect must be earned rather than assumed based on uniform or reputation. Wade stepped forward to the first testing station where the hex bar waited loaded with iron plates. The Americans had no idea what they were about to witness. The 3-repetition hex bar deadlift requiring up to 340 pounds for maximum points would be Wade's first chance to show that appearances can be deceiving. The hex bar sat loaded with iron plates that gleamed under the morning sun, as American soldiers gathered around the testing area with expressions that ranged from mild curiosity to outright skepticism. Wade approached the bar with methodical care, studying its position and checking his foot placement before wrapping his fingers around the handles. The 6 days of secret training in the Wellington Barracks gym had prepared him for this moment, but nothing could eliminate the pressure of performing under the watchful eyes of soldiers who expected him to fail. Sergeant Garrett called out the commands as Wade settled into position with his back straight and core engaged. The first repetition came smooth and controlled as Wade lifted the weight through a perfect range of motion without wobble or hesitation. The bar rose steadily from the ground to his hips before he lowered it back down with the same precision that marked his ceremonial duties. The second and third lifts followed with identical form as Wade demonstrated the solid technique that came from disciplined preparation. Wade had only needed to lift 250 pounds to pass this portion, but his training focused on reliability over records, knowing that consistency mattered more than single moments of exceptional performance. The American observers noted his controlled movements, though their expressions remained guarded as if one successful event meant little in the broader context of the complete test. What happened next would determine whether his strong opening could carry through the remaining challenges. The standing power throw tested explosive upper body power as Wade gripped the 10-pound medicine ball and positioned himself behind the starting line. His technique remained smooth and controlled as he launched the ball in a perfect arc that carried it 10.1 meters downrange, well beyond the 10-meter passing standard. The MOD officer quietly acknowledged that the throw fell within acceptable parameters, though the American soldiers continued watching with reserved judgment. Wade's ability to generate explosive force through his entire kinetic chain demonstrated capabilities that extended beyond the static strength required for ceremonial duties. Hand-release push-ups showcased Wade's exceptional muscular endurance as he dropped into position and began the grueling 2-minute event. Each repetition required him to lower his chest completely to the ground before pushing back up to full extension, eliminating any possibility of partial movements or momentum. Wade maintained a steady, unbreakable pace that impressed even the skeptical American personnel as his form remained perfect despite the growing burn in his shoulders and triceps. His breathing stayed controlled and rhythmic as he completed 51 perfect repetitions in 2 minutes that earned what Staff Sergeant Lemoyne called a clean count, well above the minimum passing requirement. The gradual shift in atmosphere became apparent as Wade progressed through these opening events with performance that exceeded every low expectation the Americans had brought to the testing facility. Conversations among the observers shifted from predictions of failure to genuine assessment of his capabilities as they recognized legitimate military fitness rather than ceremonial decoration. The precision and discipline ingrained through years of palace duty translated into controlled movements and efficient techniques that served him well under the pressure of evaluation. Sergeant Garrett began showing genuine respect rather than skepticism as Wade established himself as a legitimate competitor through these early demonstrations of strength and endurance. The Americans realized they were witnessing something different from their initial assumptions about guards being mere tourist attractions. Wade had proven that appearances could deceive and that real capability often existed beneath ceremonial uniforms. But the most challenging event still awaited, where a single mistake could end everything. The sprint drag carry event stretched before Wade as a 5-event 25-meter course, including sprint, sled drag, lateral shuffle, farmer's carry, and final sprint that would test every aspect of his physical conditioning within a punishing time frame. The morning dew had settled across the grass, creating damp conditions that glistened under the early light as Wade positioned himself at the starting line. This complex gauntlet demanded explosive speed, followed by dragging a 90-pound sled backward across rough terrain before navigating lateral shuffles that required precise footwork and coordination. Wade launched into the opening sprint with powerful strides that carried him swiftly across the marked distance before spinning to grab the sled's rope handles. The weighted platform scraped against the ground as he leaned back and drove through his legs to generate momentum for the backward drag. His 6 days of preparation had focused extensively on this technique, but the actual sled felt heavier than anything he had practiced with during his secret training sessions. The rope burned against his palms as he fought to maintain steady progress, while his quadriceps screamed under the sustained load. The lateral shuffles presented the greatest technical challenge as Wade positioned himself sideways and began the precise footwork required to navigate between the markers. His breathing had already become labored from the previous segments, but he maintained focus on each step placement, knowing that efficiency mattered more than raw speed. The damp ground demanded extra caution during the rapid directional changes where a single misstep could end everything. Everything almost ended when Wade's left foot caught a patch of particularly wet ground during the fourth shuffle sequence. His ankle rolled slightly as he felt his balance shift dangerously toward a complete fall that would have ruined his entire attempt at proving himself to the skeptical American observers. The split second stretched into what felt like minutes as Wade's body tilted beyond his center of gravity, while his arms windmilled desperately to regain control. His years in Helmand Province kicked in with reflexes that had been honed through navigating unpredictable terrain where a single misstep could mean the difference between life and death. Wade caught himself by planting his right foot firmly and using his core strength to pull his body back into proper alignment. The recovery cost him precious time, but prevented the catastrophic failure that would have confirmed every negative assumption about ceremonial soldiers lacking real military capabilities. The American observers held their breath as they witnessed Wade's near disaster unfold in real time. Sergeant Garrett stepped forward instinctively, as if preparing to call for medical assistance, but Wade's rapid recovery eliminated any need for intervention. The soldiers watching from the sidelines recognized the quality of his reaction and the mental toughness required to continue performing at maximum effort after such a close call. Wade grabbed the 40-pound kettlebells for the farmer's carry portion, with his legs still burning from the previous efforts and his lungs screaming for more oxygen. The weights felt manageable compared to the sled drag, but maintaining his grip became increasingly difficult as fatigue accumulated throughout his forearms and shoulders. Each step forward required conscious effort to prevent the kettlebells from slipping from his sweat-slicked palms, while he fought to maintain proper posture despite the growing exhaustion. The final sprint tested his ability to generate speed while operating on depleted energy reserves and compromised coordination. Wade's stride had shortened considerably from his opening effort, but he maintained forward momentum through sheer determination rather than physical capability. He crossed the finish line under the 2-minute maximum time, demonstrating resilience that impressed even the most skeptical American personnel. 2 events remained, and Wade knew the hardest test still lay ahead. Wade positioned himself on the rubber mat for the plank hold, knowing that sustained muscular effort would determine whether fatigue from the previous 5 events had compromised his ability to maintain perfect form. His forearms pressed against the ground as his body formed a straight line from head to heels, while the seconds ticked past with agonizing slowness. The minimum 2-minute passing time stretched endlessly, but Wade held his position for 4 minutes and 7 seconds as tremors shook his core muscles during the final stages, before the timer released him from the static torture. The American observers watched his technique remain flawless throughout the extended hold that demonstrated exceptional endurance beyond their expectations. The 2-mile run would become more than just a test, as Wade understood that his overall performance would be judged on this culminating challenge. His legs felt heavy from the sprint drag carry ordeal, while his breathing remained elevated from the sustained plank hold, but his mind focused on the course that stretched through varied terrain designed to test endurance under different conditions. The route featured an uphill section that would challenge his power reserves, followed by a shaded grove of trees before concluding with a final stretch across open ground where spectators could witness his finishing effort. What happened next surprised everyone, including Sergeant Garrett himself, when the American soldier stepped onto the starting line beside Wade rather than remaining with the other observers. The gesture carried unspoken significance as Garrett joined not as a competitor, but as a pacer in what had become a shared test of mutual respect rather than a one-sided demonstration. His presence transformed the final event from individual challenge to collaborative effort between soldiers from different traditions who had found common ground through physical trials and professional recognition. Wade maintained a steady, controlled pace that demonstrated his endurance management, while Garrett settled into rhythm beside him during the opening mile. The unspoken competition developed naturally as both soldiers pushed each other without verbal communication or overt displays of dominance. Their footsteps synchronized across the uphill portion where Wade's preparation became evident in his efficient stride, and controlled breathing despite the accumulated fatigue from 5 previous events. Sergeant Garrett gradually fell back as Wade's superior stamina became apparent through the middle portion of the course, where the shaded trees provided temporary relief from the morning sun. The American soldier recognized capabilities that exceeded his initial assumptions as he watched Wade subtly increase his pace without losing the smooth form that marked experienced distance runners. The acknowledgement came through physical evidence rather than verbal admission, as Garrett allowed the gap to widen while maintaining his own steady effort. Wade completed the final stretch with 3 seconds to spare under the U.S. Army time standard of 13:30 that earned him what the officials called a first-time pass of the combat fitness test, with distinction. The silence that followed his crossing of the finish line carried more weight than applause would have provided, as those present realized they had witnessed something that challenged their fundamental assumptions about ceremonial soldiers and operational capability. Sergeant Garrett approached Wade with extended hand as both soldiers caught their breath following the demanding conclusion to the 6-event test. His acknowledgement came directly when he said, "You finished all 6 events," followed by the honest admission, "I honestly didn't think you would, especially not after that slip during the drag course." Wade responded with characteristic directness that cut through any remaining pretense between them. "We train for different things doesn't mean we train any less." The handshake between the two soldiers represented mutual recognition between professionals who had moved beyond initial skepticism to earned respect through shared physical challenge. Private Jensen, who had witnessed the original dismissive comment, arrived at the sideline during the final event and offered Wade a precise salute that acknowledged what had transpired during the grueling test. Wade returned the gesture with equal precision, completing an exchange between soldiers who understood that some challenges were worth accepting even when nobody required you to prove anything. The profound silence that settled over the training facility spoke louder than any celebration could have managed. Wade stood beside the finish line with sweat still cooling on his uniform as American soldiers approached him with handshakes that carried more meaning than any formal recognition ceremony could provide. Sergeant Garrett extended his hand with genuine acknowledgement of what everyone had witnessed, while Private Jensen arrived at the testing area and offered Wade a precise military salute that erased the memory of dismissive comments made days earlier during the ceremonial event at Buckingham Palace. The transformation from skeptic to supporter had crystallized completely through 6 events that tested every aspect of his preparation. Wade returned to his position at the palace gates the next day, wearing the same red tunic and bearskin hat that had marked him as a target for American skepticism just hours earlier. The familiar weight of the ceremonial uniform felt different now as he maintained his rigid stance before crowds of international visitors who continued taking photographs without understanding the capabilities hidden beneath the wool and brass buttons. His posture remained perfect, and his attention stayed focused on potential security threats while processing the knowledge that he had earned respect from soldiers who measured worth through performance rather than appearances. The contrast between his public role and private achievement created a duality that Wade embraced rather than resented. His success at the U.S. Army combat fitness test belonged to him alone as a personal victory that required no announcement or recognition beyond the quiet satisfaction of proving himself worthy. The tourists who gathered around him would never know about his distinguished performance or the 6 days of secret preparation that had made it possible. This anonymity suited Wade perfectly, as he had never sought validation from strangers who viewed him as entertainment rather than a professional soldier. News of Wade's performance spread quietly back to Fort Campbell, reshaping perceptions of ceremonial guards among American military personnel who had witnessed something that challenged their fundamental assumptions. The soldiers who observed his achievement would remember the lesson about appearances deceiving observers who made assumptions based on uniforms rather than character. Their initial skepticism had been replaced by genuine respect for capabilities that transcended national boundaries and military traditions. Wade and Garrett had discovered common ground, despite representing different military cultures and ceremonial versus operational roles. Their handshake after the 2-mile run symbolized understanding between warriors who served their respective countries with equal dedication though in vastly different environments. The physical challenge had revealed professional competence that existed independently of nationality or assignment. True strength had proven itself through actions rather than words, as Wade demonstrated that ceremonial duty and combat readiness were not mutually exclusive concepts. His preparation had been conducted in silence, while his performance spoke loudly enough to change minds and challenge preconceptions. The discipline required to stand motionless for hours during public ceremonies translated directly into the mental fortitude needed to complete demanding physical tests under pressure from skeptical observers. Wade's quiet confidence and proven abilities represented the best qualities of military tradition and personal character that existed independently of recognition or reward. His commitment to excellence had driven him to accept an unofficial challenge that nobody required him to face, while maintaining the humility that marked true professionals. The experience had reinforced his understanding that genuine capability stood ready when called upon, whether the mission involved ceremonial precision or physical performance. The lasting impact would continue influencing how others viewed soldiers whose duties appeared ceremonial but whose dedication matched any operational unit. What began with a dismissive comment from an American soldier about Royal Guards being just for show had transformed into something entirely different through Wade's silent determination. His 6 days of rigorous preparation and flawless performance during the U.S. Army Combat Fitness Test proved that ceremonial discipline matched operational demands when rigorously tested. The tourists who continued photographing him at Buckingham Palace would never know about his achievement, but that anonymity suited him perfectly. Wade had rewritten expectations without speaking a single word in his defense. His actions demonstrated that strength reveals itself through performance rather than proclamation, while proving that uniforms never define the soldier who wears them. Drop a comment. Did Wade's performance change how you view ceremonial soldiers?